Hello and welcome to Nuala Reads in Edinburgh, my YouTube channel, where I talk about what I'm reading and what I think of them. This is my difficult second album or second video, so I thought I'd talk about all the books I finished in February. This February I finished 11 books. All of them were fiction, which is moderately unusual, I would say. I actually had some fiction books that I was reading non-fiction books that I was reading. It just happens that I didn't finish any of them in February, which is probably pretty typical for non-fiction. I often take a lot longer to read non-fiction. Maybe I'm overly attached to reading them cover to cover when I should take more of a dipping in and out of them sort of attitude towards the whole thing, but I am who I am, so that's what I do. Anyway, so yeah, I read 11 books. 7 of them were from the library. 3 of them were ebooks. All of them ebooks I'd already owned. Not to say that I didn't buy any ebooks, because I am a sucker for 99p ebooks, although I should probably try and tamp that down a bit. And then one of them was from the house. It's not even one of my books. It was one owned by one of my kids, but still, I'll take it as a one more read book in the house win. First book I finished in February was The Vegetarian by Han Kang, translated by Deborah Smith. Han Kang won the most recent, I think, Nobel Prize for Literature. She's a Korean writer, and when somebody wins the Nobel Prize for Literature, I always feel like I should go and read one of her books or one of their books, but I always find it really hard to know where to start. And generally, I often don't have much context, so I don't know much about Korean culture or history. What I do know, probably mostly gleaned from novels rather than actually knowing much of the history. But I did think that this was a very interesting, and it was a good book, but it was tough to read. The misogyny was she wasn't pulling any punches with it. So it's the story of a woman who wakes up one day after having nightmares and decides that from now on she's not going to eat meat anymore, and she's not going to prepare meat for her husband. There's a passage really early on which I found really shocking, where her husband talked about how he had married her because she would be straightforward and not too difficult, as I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said about her as a wife. And that is just a really shocking sentiment to read, said quite so explicitly. It's I guess the theme of the novel is how uncomfortable it makes both her husband and then her family of birth for her to have decided to just refuse to eat meat and not really engage with everyone about why it's happening. She can't really explain, but how much that is a failure on her not being able to explain, and how much is a failure on them not being able to hear what she's saying about what she's realized, is really interesting. It definitely made me want to read more of her books. The second book I finished was Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke and Other Misfortunes by Eric LaRocca. I really didn't like this book. I'll admit it was the title that sucked me in, and a couple of people talked about it, and I really should remember that I'm just not a horror person, like psychological horror-ish. There's 3 stories in this. I can really only remember the title story, and that I think could have done with being fleshed out, actually. It was it's told in letters or emails between 2 women who are, I guess, pushing each other to see how far they will go, and what results. But yeah, it's just this sort of book is just not for me. I guess it's all wrapped up with, as I said in my last video, I'm not that fond of crimey, thrillery novels either. I mean, sometimes I am, but no, it really, I should remember that just because I've seen a book come up and it has a cool title that I enjoy, um, I should remember what genres it is that I don't really read, and maybe stick to that a bit more. Anyway, yeah, it's a shame. I probably won't pick up any more books by him. The third book I read was Roaming by Gillian and Mariko Tamaki. It's a graphic novel. Stole it from my elder kids' bookcase. Uh, it's about three young women exploring New York. Two of them, Zoe and Danny, are now in different colleges, but were in school together. And then Fiona is in college with Zoe, I think, and has come along to for their trip to New York. I think they're all from Canada, and yeah, they explore New York. They stay in a hostel. They go and see things. It's a very short visit to New York. I guess it's got themes of, when you get to college, you try and work out what was you that was always there and what was you trying to fit in the environment of your school and your family, what you want to change, what you want to keep. Um, Also, new person in a friendship introduces a difficult, tricky dynamic. Um, Particularly this person, Fiona, she pushes people's boundaries. It's hard to tell how much of what she says is actually true. I enjoyed it. That said, I'm not remembering all that much that happened, but I think it's pretty typical for you know young women in a big exciting city. They're like testing the boundaries of what they want to do, but they also need to look after themselves and stand up for each other. And I think mostly they managed to do that. I did really like the drawing style. I really liked the just how particularly the three main characters were drawn. Kind of, there was a real kind of feeling of realness in their faces. Like, I don't really know how to describe that, but I felt like those were the faces not of like platonic ideals, but of women, young women as they actually are. You could see the differences in how some of them wore makeup and some of them didn't, things like that, which I liked. Um, I think there might be a theme on the books that I finished this month where there's a couple of them where I'm going, I would have really loved this if I read this at the right age, and now I can see that what it's doing is good, but it doesn't really talk to my concerns right now. And I guess Roaming is one of those. The next book, and this is another one with this theme, I would say, Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews. It's about two boys, Andrew, who writes these short little pseudo fairy tales where he's trying to maybe tell his best friend, Thomas, who draws, often inspired by the fairy tales, how he really feels about him. Andrew also has a sister called Dove, and the two of them attend the private school which Thomas also attends. Andrew and Dove's dad is Australian and a businessman, so he drops them off at the boarding school every year so that he can get on with his work. I can't actually remember what happened to their mother. Then there's Thomas, who is Andrew's friend and roommate, and at the end of the summer he has returned and something has happened to his parents, but he's very vague as to what. He doesn't really want to ask questions. The police have come and requested some information, but they haven't really found anything yet, so it's all just a bit mysterious. As I was reading this, I really thought that I would have absolutely loved it as a teen. The kind of themes of wanting to open yourself up, but being scared of it, and what if what's inside you is so terrible that the other person will reject you, were really well evoked. But ultimately, I found it a little bit surface level. But it's a YA novel, so it's not really fair of me to criticize it for not being as deep as I think the themes were handled well. And if you're into YA, also this is horror, and I didn't mind it as much as I did the other book. So make of that what you will. The next book I read was my favorite book last month, and that was Home Fires by Camilla Shashi. This is a story. It's on the back that it's a Greek retelling, and I kind of wish I hadn't known which story it was retelling. But anyway, so there's a young woman who has spent the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years since her mother died. She kind of had to put her adult life on hold and bring up her younger brother and sister. And now her sister has started uni, and you're not really sure what's happened to her brother at first. He's disappeared. And she's got a chance to reconnect with an old mentor and to start research and restart her education. And she's trying to live without drawing attention to herself. I don't think I've said she's from a Pakistani British family. And it's becoming clear that their feelings about, it becomes clear quite early on that their feelings about not wanting to have attention drawn to themselves there's a little more to it than just the standard feelings that many Muslim British people feel around the assumptions the police service might make about them, that there's like specifically something that's happened in their family's past, which means that they're more likely to be looked at. So when she came over to America, she was really nervous about whether or not she would actually get permission to go over, but she did. She then runs into a young man called Eamon, who she actually knows who he is because she knows that his father used to live in their area and then moved on somewhere else. Well, is Pakistani, British as well, but has become a well-known politician. He's just become the Home Secretary, who is slightly infamous for being very pro-assimilation as the way to go, rather than a multicultural thing where the cultures of the people that move to UK can be maintained and understood and become part of the culture of the UK, with the assumption being much better off having becoming like people in the UK expect you to be. He's married an Irish woman, and they have a son together. And the son is maybe a little bit naive about all of this, a bit disconnected from the Pakistani half of his family, it sounds like. And then, so he ends up going back to the UK and connecting with Isma's sister, Anika. And then they start up a relationship, and from there, I won't say too much more, but there's a really excellent description of the sort of grooming that young British Muslim teenagers can be, what makes them vulnerable to it, and how it works, and what they can end up happening. And you find out a bit more about what's happened to the woman's brother, why he's missing, and the story goes on from there. I really, really thought this book was very good. It's actually apparently from 2017. I don't know why I hadn't heard of it at the time. I can't really remember on whose recommendation I picked it up. I'm just like constantly writing down the names of novels or putting them on my reservation list in the local library or on wish lists. So I'm not very great at keeping track of where I got recommendations for, which is a shame really, because this was such a good book that really I should go and, if I remembered who I got that recommendation for, I'd go and read other books that they recommended. But anyway, yes, that's Home Fires um, from 2017. But we can't all, backlist books are good too, and that's the great thing about libraries. They have loads of backlist books, and if you take them out, they'll keep them on the shelves longer. Anyway, the following book that I read is Mother Dead by Vigdis Hjorth. I should have looked that up. Sorry, and translated by Charlotte Borsland. I think from the cover, which is slightly cartoony, I expected this book to be more comic than it actually was, but I did again really enjoy it. I thought it was very interesting. It's about a woman who is an artist, and she has been living in, I think, America for quite a long time, but she has returned to Oslo because there's going to be a retrospective of her work. And the work is very much around motherhood, the mother and child relationship, and she is estranged from her family, from her sister and her mother. And you slowly, it's told in very short chunks from the artist's point of view, and you slowly realize that some of what she's saying, it's not quite unreliable. It can't be trusted, but it can't be trusted because she's so confused about what's going on. I'm not sure. She's really struggling herself to try and work out how she feels and what she wants from her mother. I mean, what she wants from her mother is some acknowledgement about something that she's not entirely straightforward about what it is she wants acknowledged. And the suggestion is maybe if her mother does acknowledge that would be a betrayal somehow, or her mother's just not comfortable in acknowledging this thing. It's very, very interesting novel. I thought it was really good, and I also, just after I finished it, I read an article about some other of her novels, and I really want to read now a book called Will and Testament, which kind of sounds like maybe Is Mother Dead, although it's officially about an artist and her family's reaction to her art, could be a way for her to talk about what happened when she wrote this other book. Will and Testament has been compared to Festin, which, if you've seen Festin, that should give you an idea of the themes. Yeah, I really want to go find that, read that, and see how I feel. See if there's a through line between them. The next book I read, it was clearly time for some slightly lighter books, was 7 Days in June by Tia Williams, which many people on here have raved about. I think loads of people put it in their top 10 list maybe a year ago, can't remember. It's a really enjoyable book. It's a romance, second chance romance. The main character is a romance author she has written a series, an erotic series about, is it a vampire and a witch? Anyway, yeah, paranormal romance. And it's a series and she's got loads of fans, but she's burnt out. She doesn't want to write them anymore. She's supposed to be handing in the 15th one very soon, and she's just kind of had enough, but she needs to keep writing because, she's got a daughter who's in a prestigious school in Brooklyn. The bits about like Brooklyn teenagers and the way they talk to each other are very funny. This author is Black, and so is the other author who she meets at this very funnily described panel where Black authors are talking about what it's like to be Black. And the kind of through line of kind of gentle satire around the book industry and how having an identity both means that you have having an identity. I mean, that's a really being part of a minoritized group both means that you have other people who will be there for you and will support you, but also means you have people make assumptions about what you want to write and why you want to write it, and have expectations of you based on that, which can be awkward. So the other author is, much more kind of literary fiction, has published far fewer books, but they've been very successful. And it becomes clear that, in fact, the two of them met when they were teenagers, and what they have both been working through in their novels is their feelings around that very brief relationship they had. And now this is their chance to maybe reconnect, maybe not. I thought it was really fun. It was really enjoyable. There's themes of childhood trauma and what we do to try and avoid that trauma repeating for next generations, and also how much we can be there for other people and how much getting overly focused on that can actually blind us to the limits around what you can do. I mean, everyone who raved about it was right. It's really very enjoyable. And doesn't, it works for things. It doesn't make things end too patly. It's got one of the things I really dislike, because the main character has a child, and I often really dislike in second chance romances, the ways that any future partners are gotten rid of, like they're horrible, or they're dead, or just kind of written off the page really quickly. Whereas the guy in this just wasn't the right partner, but he's still engaged with his daughter. He's still a good friend, and I like that a lot. I don't like, either you're the one or you're terrible. Like that sort of black and whiteness in romances sometimes annoys me. Okay, the next book I read was The Heart Principle by Helen Huang. It's another romance. This one I read because I was having trouble sleeping, so I read it in about 2.5 hours in the middle of the night. But I really enjoyed it. It was a really good description of burnout, and how sometimes if you're stuck in burnout and you haven't really learnt how to advocate for yourself, it can be very difficult to explain to other people what's going on, and they can think you're just being self-indulgent and weird when actually no, there's something quite serious going on with you. I read the start of it and was like, oh, this is going to be another autistically coded character where they're never actually going to bring up the fact that she's autistic, but in actual fact, quite early on, her therapist suggested to her, and I was really relieved by that. It was an enjoyable book. It is a romance, so quite early on, as well as being stuck in burnout, she has a shitty boyfriend, and it's almost like she's so busy masking and just trying to do the things that people assume she should do, that she doesn't realize how shitty he is. And because of that, she has allowed herself to be in a really just a horrible relationship. And then he announces one day that he thinks they should have an open relationship for a while. And but it's fairly clear he's assuming that only he's going to have an open relationship. So she kind of goes, okay, fine, if that's what you want, and goes on the apps and meets someone, planning to have a one-night stand. But because the guy that she's lucky enough to choose is respectful, and even though he is also out for a one-night stand and has his own reasons why he would like one, he's not willing to push boundaries in order to achieve that end. They end up slowly developing a relationship, and then something happens in Anna's life which really puts a lot of weight on her shoulders. And it's a really, a lot of romance novels, they're like, I have to have a third act breakup. And it's quite facile, whereas this, first of all, isn't really a third act breakup, and secondly, is just a really good description of caring responsibilities and what they do to people. And yeah, and then towards the end, things get better, and I just really, really enjoyed it. And it was a very quick read, kind of sweet. I haven't read anything else by this author. Maybe I will in future. The next book I read was Caledonian Road by Andrea Hagen, which I talked about at the end of my last video. It's about a man named Campbell Flynn, who is Scottish, but moved down to England, I guess, after university. And he is a art critic and academic, and it's a State of the Nation novel, by which I mean there's like loads and loads of characters who are all interconnected in some ways. Like they all live around Caledonian Road, but they all represent something about the state of London as it is right now. As well as Campbell, there is his two children. There is his best friend and his best friend's child. There is a young student he's very interested in. There's he's got a tenant in the flat downstairs. There's various young people who live in the neighborhood and who know his student, but and the story all interconnects. There's probably other people as well, but anyway, that's all I can remember right now. But it manages to cover like a lot. It covers Russian oligarchs, the money both in politics and in art world, also in property. It covers Bitcoin. It covers, there's a very funny scene where the main character has to give a speech in the British Museum, and he decides to give it about how all the things there are either stolen or fake, which is quite enjoyable. I'd quite like to see like a TV series of it with that speech, kind of as the climax of one of the episodes. It covers a year. I still, like as I said in the last thing, I find it frustrating that it's called a State of the Nation novel when it's really a State of London novel. But I think it does cover a lot of things that are happening in London that are different from maybe a facile assumption of what London is like might have. Okay, the next novel I finished was Station Eternity by Muriel Lafferty, which is another book that I showed you at the end of my last video. The main character, Mallory, has been followed by murders all her life. She doesn't really understand why. She does know that she will often be able to solve them, but she really, at some point, she just has enough and she just wants to withdraw and be somewhere where she's not going to trigger murders because she's become traumatized by them. So she ends up on a space station, called Station Eternity, and she is one of only two humans there, her and the Earth diplomat who is trying to reach out and convince the kind of extraterrestrial world to connect with the Earth. I like that this is a good book. It's a mystery, so I can't tell you too much more about it. More humans come along, and Mallory says, right, something terrible is going to happen. And sure enough, it does. But what I really liked about it was the world building, because you end up learning an awful lot about the impact on the Earth of aliens suddenly deciding to contact the Earth and to interact with people on Earth, with humans, but not in a didactic way. It's all very natural for the backstories of all the characters. And some of the characters, the extraterrestrial stuff has taken a big part in, and some of them has taken a very small part in. And yeah, that's just really well done. The mystery is, um, yeah, pretty enjoyable, pretty satisfactory. The ending, yeah, it's a good book. It's enjoyable, read quickly. The final book I read was Long Live Evil by Sarah Rees Brennan, which, oh, this book is so frustrating. I wanted to love it. Like, the high concept is it's a woman who's dying, and she's always been a big fan of this book series because she read it with her sister when she first started getting ill. And she's just about to die, and somebody approaches her and tells her that she can go into the book and that there's a flower in there that will restore her to health. She just needs to go into the story and then get access to the flower when it flowers, and she'll be able to recover. And it's got quite interesting themes of like, how do you act when you believe that everyone around you isn't really a person? It's not quite solipsism, but it is related to solipsism. But it's like a feeling like, oh well, they're going to act the way they are because of tropes. And I liked that idea in theory, but in practice, it just didn't quite click for me, and I'm not quite sure what it was that didn't work. I will say that I really enjoyed the ending. So after reading it quite slowly and never quite getting into it, spread over like maybe best part of 2 months, the ending I finished in a rush and did enjoy. So I am looking forward to the next one, although I probably will get it out of the library. Yeah, yeah, it's kind of like maybe the book I made up in my head was not the book that she was writing, and it's unreasonable of me to feel that it should have been the book that that she wrote. It's a tricky one. So yeah, critical support. I don't know. I think I gave it a 3.5. I haven't really said about stars because I don't give stars to every book. I gave 5 stars to Homefire because I thought that was amazing, and I can't really remember. I think a couple of other books I gave 4 stars. I'm much more inclined to give star ratings to ones that I think are 4 or 5 than ones I don't think are great, because a lot of the time, like basically if a book gets published nowadays, I think it probably is going to be a well-written, competent piece of craft. I hope it's going to be a well-written, competent piece of craft, and it's more that the book wasn't the book for me. So yeah, I haven't really done star rating, but that gives you a vague idea of how I feel about these things. Anyway, so finally, I'd like to talk about the 3 books that I'm currently in the middle of. The first is Scabby Queen by Kirsten Innes. By the fact that this is the hardback, you can probably tell I've had this for a while because this book has been out for a couple of years. And I've been meaning to read it for ages, and now I've finally opened it up. I did some Googling for State of the Nation books after my complaints about Caledonian Road, and this came up as a Scottish State of the Nation book. And we shall see. I'm not really far enough into it yet to tell, but it is about a woman who, Cleo Campbell, who's just about to turn 51 and who kills herself. And it's then told in a series of flashes back to her past when she was a famous-ish pop star in London. She had a a breakout hit with a protest song about the poll tax, and it follows her career after that and all the many people whose life she impacted. And yeah, I'm just really looking forward to. I mean, her character to spend part of the time in London, and that is just the reality of people who uh, want to make it big in arts in the UK. And I'm really interested in how it ends up balancing her Scottishness and the time she spends in London. And yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. I'm not very far in. Next book I'm reading is the non-fiction book that I'm currently playing my way through. Playing my way through is like so unfair. This is such a good book. This is Empire of Pain by Patrick Radden Keefe, and it's a story about the Sacklers, who used to be curiously famous for how many museums mysteriously had wings named after them, but nowadays are much more infamous for OxyContin and the part that it played in the opioid epidemic in the US. It's a very interesting book. I haven't even got to OxyContin yet, and I'm halfway through, pretty much. So that's the story that made them infamous, but the kind of patriarch of the family also basically invented modern pharmaceutical advertising in the US, and was also heavily involved with both Valium and Librium, who are other drugs which were claimed to be non-addictive that turned out to have pretty terrible long-term effects on many of the people who took them. And similarly to how the Sacklers acted around OxyContin, the view was very much taken that the problem was not the drug, it was the internal intrinsic weakness of the people who became addicted. I've always found this. I find this story. I've been intrigued about the Sacklers for a long time. I watched Dopesick on Disney Plus, which was a very good kind of dramatization of the effects of OxyContin across the US, and the cynicism of how the family were very focused, not so much on ameliorating or withdrawing the drug, but just making sure that it wasn't connected to them. But I can't remember why I put this on my reservation list in the library, but when I went to pick it up, the one of the librarians there, as I was checking it out, said to me that he thought it was a good book, but he really enjoyed it as The House of Usher on Netflix, where the members of the family are very satisfactorily killed off one by one because of their cynicism and the way they use the pharmaceutical industry. So that has inspired me as soon as I'm finished this to go and watch the series. And also, talk to your librarians. They can be very funny, and they know lots of things. Last book I'm reading is called Turnglass by Gareth Rubin, and I saw this on is it Meg with Books channel. She spent last year. She did a series where she got book recommendations from different people in different ways, and it ended up with what is called a book spa in a shop in Bath, which just looked amazing. Like basically, you book time with the bookseller, and they give you loads of suggestions for books you might enjoy reading, based on the books that you're reading. You've told them that you enjoy, and this was one of the ones that was suggested. And the kind of conceit behind this is so you start on this side and you read through to the middle, and then that's the end of that story, and then you turn it over and print it upside down or in the other direction. is the second half of the story told from a different point of view. And I was just really taken by that idea. And in a total kind of moment of synchronicity, or once you've heard of something once, you start noticing it again. Somebody else was talking about a book called To and Fro that's got a similar sort of conceit that I may well pick up soon. Anyway, I'm not very far into Turnglass. The side that I'm reading right now is about a kind of Gothic-ish Victorian story of a young doctor who's been called to help his not exactly uncle, like his father's cousin, who's ill and who lives on a tidal island. A little bit frustrated with how the tidal island thing works. So there's like a tidal island which just has the house that his uncle lives on, and then behind it there's a second island, and there's also a tidal cutoff between the two of them, which is kind of where the village where he's a parson is, and where the servants live, for example. And there's a bit where the one of the servant characters quite early on says, "Oh, I work from this hour to this hour." And if she's having to cross a tidal path, that's not how her working hours would work, because it would change all the time. But anyway, maybe this will all turn out to make sense in the end. The main, not the main thing, and then the other thing that's happening is it turns out the character's uncle has got a woman, like weirdly, like one end of his library, she's behind a piece of glass, and she is his sister-in-law, who was responsible for the death of his brother. And she's being held here because the alternative was going to Bedlam. And she directs the point of view character to pick up a novel, which turns out to be a story set in 1939, which obviously from their point of view is science fictional. And I suspect that will turn out to be the story that you're reading on the other side. But I don't know enough yet to see how the two intertwine. But it's a very kind of woman in white-esque, late Victorian scandal novel-ish at the moment, which is very enjoyable. It's a good genre. I like both that genre and many, many pastiches of them, like many of Sarah Waters' Victorian books. It's got a similar tone so far, and I suspect it's not going to be sapphic, which obviously is one of the things that Sarah Waters does very well, but it's still like an interesting story and an interesting conceit, and I'm enjoying it. So that is everything I have read over the last month, everything I'm in the middle of right now. Have you got any thoughts on any novels I've read? Some people, after my last one, subscribed. If you wanted to do that, that would be great. Liking this video would also be good. Let me know if any of the books I've liked, disliked, whether that's inspired you to suggest other books to me, because I'm always on the lookout for more books. And yeah, thank you very much. Talk to you soon. Bye.